You don't belong here. Get out. This is family only." Those words were screaming across the marina that Tuesday morning, echoing off million-dollar yachts while wealthy families turned to stare. My sister-in-law Aaliyah was standing there in her designer sundress, face red with rage, literally ripping up what looked like my boarding pass into tiny pieces that scattered in the ocean breeze. And there I was, Sage Luca, standing on the dock with my carefully packed suitcase, watching 3 years of trying to fit into this family crumble right along with that paper. The hurt was real. The embarrassment was crushing. But then something shifted inside me. That's when I started laughing. Because Aaliyah had absolutely no idea what she'd just done. She had no clue about the phone calls I'd made the week before, the paperwork sitting in my briefcase, or the little secret that was about to turn her perfect family yacht trip into the most humiliating moment of her privileged life. You see, when someone tries to exclude you from something that's supposedly not even theirs to begin with, well, that's when things get interesting. And trust me, what happened next shocked everyone on that dock, including my own husband. But before I tell you how I went from the rejected outsider to completely flipping the script on this entire family, I need you to understand how we got here. Because this story isn't just about a yacht trip gone wrong, it's about what happens when you underestimate the quiet one in the room. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this revenge story unfolds, because you're not going to believe what I had hidden up my sleeve. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever been excluded from something by someone who had no right to exclude you? Because after you hear what Aaliyah did next, you're going to understand exactly why I couldn't stop smiling. My name is Sage Luca. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a maritime law attorney. But before you picture some trust fund baby who sailed into law school on daddy's yacht, let me paint you the real picture. I grew up in a tiny coastal town in Maine, where my parents, God bless them, owned a small fishing boat repair shop. We're talking about a business where my mom kept the books on a kitchen table, and my dad came home every night with grease under his fingernails and salt in his hair. Money was tight, but we had something that apparently money can't buy. We had each other's backs. No matter what, I worked my way through law school, waiting tables at a seafood restaurant, studying maritime law because boats and the ocean were literally in my blood. I specialized in yacht and maritime disputes because, ironically, I understood both sides, the working-class fishermen and the wealthy yacht owners. I spoke both languages. My values were simple: hard work, family loyalty, and quiet strength. I didn't need to prove I belonged anywhere because I made my own place. And here's something about me that becomes important later. I handle things quietly. Charles, my husband, knows this about me, but what he doesn't know could fill an ocean. I met Charles 6 years ago at a maritime law conference in Boston. He was working in maritime insurance, and we connected over our shared understanding of the industry. He was different from his family, grounded, hardworking, and he genuinely seemed to appreciate my background rather than judge it. But his family? That's where things got complicated. Charles came from old money, the kind of generational wealth where yacht club memberships get passed down like family heirlooms. His parents, Robert and Patricia, were polite to me, but there was always this invisible distance, like I was a guest who'd overstayed her welcome at a dinner party I was never really invited to. Then there's Aaliyah, Charles's little sister, 29 years old, and the walking definition of a trust fund baby. She's never worked a day in her life, but somehow she's convinced she's the authority on who deserves what in this family. Controlling doesn't even begin to cover it. When Charles and I got married 3 years ago, he made me a promise. "You're my family now, that's all that matters." I believed him. I wanted to believe him, so I tried. Oh, how I tried to fit in. I attended yacht club events, where I smiled politely while women in $1,000 sundresses asked me what my people did for work. I learned the difference between a regatta and a race. I even took sailing lessons, though I could probably navigate those waters better than half of them just from growing up around boats. But there were signs. Aaliyah's subtle exclusions started almost immediately. Forgotten invitations to family events. "Oh, I thought Charles would have told you we changed the date." Little things that Charles either didn't notice or chose to ignore. I gave her 3 years to warm up to me. 3 years of patience, of turning the other cheek, of believing that eventually she'd see I wasn't going anywhere. Every year, the family takes a 10-day yacht trip to the Caribbean. It's their sacred tradition, the highlight of their social calendar. This year was supposed to be extra special because they were celebrating Robert's 65th birthday. I was genuinely excited. I'd bought expensive gifts, planned surprises, even researched special restaurants in each port we'd visit. I wanted this trip to be perfect, to finally prove that I could be the daughter-in-law they never knew they wanted. Then, 1 week before we were supposed to leave, everything changed. Aaliyah called Charles directly. Not me, never me. About some changes to the trip. When I asked Charles what kind of changes, he got this uncomfortable look on his face that I'd learned to recognize over the years. Well, he said, not meeting my eyes, Aaliyah thinks you seem really stressed with work lately. She suggested maybe you need a break, and you could join us for the last few days instead of the full trip. That's when I discovered that not only had my name been removed from the guest list, but it had been replaced by Tyler, a 26-year-old gym coach who Aaliyah had been obsessing over for the past 2 months. Let me repeat that. I, the wife of 3 years, was being replaced by my sister-in-law's gym buddy. When I confronted Charles about this, his response was the weakest thing I'd ever heard come out of his mouth. Maybe you could join us for the last few days? You know how Aaliyah gets when she's planning something. That night, after Charles fell asleep, I sat in our kitchen and realized something. I was done being patient. I was done being understanding. I was done letting Aaliyah treat me like some temporary inconvenience in her brother's life. But here's the thing about me that Aaliyah never bothered to learn. I don't argue. I don't make scenes. I don't fight dirty. I fight smart. So I didn't argue with Charles. I didn't call Aaliyah and demand an explanation. I just smiled and told my husband I understood completely. Then I made some calls. And those calls? Well, those calls were about to change everything. So there I was, Tuesday morning at the marina, rolling my suitcase down the dock exactly as planned. The sun was shining, the boats were gleaming, and I had never felt more ready for a vacation in my life. That's when I spotted Aaliyah near the yacht, clipboard in hand, like she was running some kind of exclusive resort. The moment she saw me, her face went from yacht club princess to absolute fury in about 2 seconds flat. "What are you doing here?" she practically shrieked, loud enough that heads started turning from 3 docks over. "I told Charles you weren't coming. Now, remember, we're in public. This is the marina where her family has been members for decades. These are people they know, people they do business with, people whose opinions matter in their social circle." But Aaliyah was so determined to humiliate me that she didn't care who was watching. "The guest list is final," she announced, waving that clipboard like it was some kind of legal document. "You are not on this boat." Tyler, her gym coach boy toy, was standing awkwardly behind her, clearly wishing he could disappear into the ocean. Even he seemed to understand that this was crossing a line. Other family members were scattered around the dock, loading luggage, and I could see the embarrassment on their faces. Patricia actually looked away. But Aaliyah wasn't done. Oh no, she was just getting started. She actually pointed at me and called over a security guard. "Excuse me, sir, this woman is not on our guest list. She's trespassing." The security guard looked uncomfortable, glancing between Aaliyah's designer outfit and my calm demeanor. "Ma'am," he said to me, "are you on the guest list for this vessel?" I smiled, the kind of smile that should have been Aaliyah's first warning that something wasn't right. "Check again," I said simply. That's when Aaliyah reached her crescendo. Her voice echoed across the entire marina. "You don't belong here. Get out. This is family only." And that's when I started laughing. Not a little chuckle, not a nervous giggle, a full, genuine laugh that made everyone within earshot stop what they were doing. "Oh, Aaliyah," I said, still laughing. "Sweet, clueless Aaliyah. Let me take you back to those phone calls I made the week before. See, being a maritime law attorney means I know exactly how to research vessel ownership. It's literally what I do for a living. So when Aaliyah decided to play games with guest lists, I decided to do a little research on the yacht itself. What I found made my blood run cold. and then immediately made me smile. The family yacht that they'd been treating like their personal playground? It wasn't theirs anymore. Robert, Charles's father, had been in serious financial trouble. Bad investments, mounting debts, the kind of money problems that old money families pretend don't exist until they absolutely can't anymore. 6 months ago, the yacht had been quietly sold to pay his creditors. The new owner was listed as an anonymous LLC called Maritime Holdings Group. Very discreet, very professional, very familiar. Because I had created that LLC. You see, when my grandmother passed away 2 years ago, she left me the money from selling her small fishing business. It wasn't yacht buying money by most people's standards, but my grandmother had been saving every penny for 60 years. Combined with my own savings, it was enough. I bought the yacht. The yacht that Aaliyah was now trying to ban me from was legally, completely, 100% mine. The family had no idea they were about to be guests on my boat. I was still laughing when Captain Khalid approached from the yacht. He was a professional captain the family had hired for years, someone who knew the boat inside and out. He walked right past Aaliyah, right past the security guard, straight to me. "Miss Luca," he said with a big smile. "Welcome aboard, owner." If you've never seen someone's face go through the 5 stages of grief in real time, you should have been watching Aaliyah at that moment. Confusion, denial, anger, bargaining, and acceptance flashed across her features like a slideshow. Charles stepped forward, completely bewildered. "Sage, what's going on?" I pulled out my briefcase. Yes, I had brought my briefcase to a family vacation, because I'm always prepared, and calmly removed a folder. Inside were all the ownership papers, purchase agreements, and transfer documents. The yacht was foreclosed on 6 months ago, I explained in my most professional voice, the same tone I use in court. Your father sold it to pay his debts. Robert's face went white. His financial secrets, the ones he'd been hiding from his own family, were suddenly laid bare on a marina dock. Patricia, ever the proper lady, could only manage, "This is impossible." But it wasn't impossible. It was documented, notarized, and completely legal. Aaliyah was having what could only be described as a complete meltdown. "This can't be happening. This is our boat. Our family tradition." Tyler, bless his heart, had started quietly backing away from the situation. Even a gym coach could read the room well enough to know he was suddenly very unwelcome. And there I stood, the woman who didn't belong, holding the deed to the yacht they'd been planning to exclude me from. If you're enjoying this story of the ultimate family yacht revenge, make sure you subscribe, because the family's reaction to what I did next is absolutely priceless. Let me ask you this. If you owned something, and someone tried to ban you from it, how would you handle it? Will you leave the boat to avoid trouble, or claim ownership like I did? Let me know in the comments. Because what I decided to do shocked even my own husband. The silence on that dock was deafening. You could hear the water lapping against the hulls, seagulls calling overhead, but not a single word from the family that had just discovered their dirty little secret. I looked at each of them. Robert with his face drained of color, Patricia clutching her pearls like they might save her from this embarrassment, Charles staring at me like he was seeing his wife for the first time. And Aaliyah. Well, Aaliyah looked like her entire world had just collapsed. That's when I made my choice about how this was going to go. "I bought this yacht to save your family tradition," I said, my voice carrying across the marina with the same calm authority I use in courtrooms. This wasn't supposed to be a dramatic reveal on a dock with security guards and screaming matches. I could see the confusion spreading across their faces. This wasn't the story they were expecting. "My original plan," I continued, "was to surprise you all at Robert's birthday dinner. I was going to present the yacht back to the family as a gift, to make sure this tradition you all love so much could continue for generations." Robert's mouth actually fell open. Patricia's hand went to her heart. Even Tyler, who was still trying to edge away from this family disaster, stopped moving. "But Aaliyah's behavior this past week forced my hand early," I said, turning to look directly at my sister-in-law. "Because I realized that some of you needed to learn a lesson about respect before I could trust you with such a gift." Now here's where it got interesting. I had a choice to make, and everyone on that dock knew it. I can make this yacht a gift to your family, ensuring your tradition continues forever, I said slowly, letting each word sink in. Or I can enforce my legal property rights as the owner and decide exactly who gets to step foot on my boat. The power had completely shifted. Suddenly, Aaliyah wasn't the gatekeeper of the guest list. I was. And that's when the backtracking began. Sage, I was just protecting my family. Aaliyah stammered, her voice completely different now. Gone was the screaming, the authority, the righteous indignation. I was trying to make sure. Make sure of what, Aaliyah? I asked, my voice still calm, but with an edge that made her flinch. Make sure I knew my place? Make sure I understood that I don't really belong in this family? She couldn't answer because we both knew that was exactly what she'd been trying to do. Here's the thing about respect, Aaliyah, I continued. It goes both ways. I've spent 3 years trying to earn yours, being patient with your little exclusions, your forgotten invitations, your passive-aggressive comments. But respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you command. I could see Charles out of the corner of my eye, and the expression on his face was something I'd never seen before. It was pride mixed with shame. Pride in seeing his wife's strength finally on full display, but shame in realizing how weak he'd been in protecting me from his sister's behavior. I'm proud of you, he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear, and I'm sorry I didn't stand up to her sooner. Robert stepped forward then, and I could see the gratitude and embarrassment warring in his expression. Here was a man who'd built his reputation on financial success, on being the patriarch who provided for his family, and now his son's wife, the woman his daughter had just tried to humiliate, had saved his family's most treasured tradition. Sage, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. I had no idea you knew about the financial situation, and to think that you would. He couldn't finish the sentence. The magnitude of what I'd done and what Aaliyah had almost destroyed was sinking in for all of them. The woman they'd treated as an outsider had just proven she was more family than some of the people who shared their blood. The yacht trip that followed was unlike any family vacation they'd ever taken. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, trying to prove I belonged. Everyone knew exactly where they stood. But here's what I didn't expect: the loneliness that came with winning. Aaliyah's behavior was completely transformed. The woman who had screamed at me on the dock was now asking if I needed anything, if I was comfortable, if there was anything she could do to help. It was almost heartbreaking, watching someone who had built her entire identity around controlling others suddenly realize she had no control at all. Part of me felt sorry for her, because I recognized something in her eyes that I knew all too well: the fear of not being enough. Tyler? Well, Tyler quietly removed himself from the situation before we even left the marina. Turns out, when you're just the gym coach and not actually family, dramatic yacht ownership reveals tend to make you reconsider your vacation plans. On the second day of the trip, I found myself crying in the yacht's bathroom. Not from sadness, but from 3 years of held-back emotion finally finding its way out. All those times I'd smiled when I wanted to scream, all those family gatherings where I felt like an outsider looking in, all those nights I'd gone to bed wondering if I'd ever be good enough for Charles's family. It all came pouring out. When I finally composed myself and returned to the deck, Robert was waiting for me. He took one look at my red-rimmed eyes and his own filled with tears. I'm sorry, he whispered, and I realized he wasn't just apologizing for Aaliyah's behavior. He was apologizing for 3 years of making me feel like I had to earn my place at their table. That evening, Robert found me sitting alone on the upper deck, watching the sunset paint the Caribbean waters gold. He sat down beside me, and for a long moment, we just watched the waves. I could see him struggling with something, this proud man who wasn't used to showing vulnerability. Thank you, he said finally, his voice breaking slightly, for saving face for this family. You could have let us all find out the hard way, could have humiliated us the way we humiliated you, but you didn't. You protected us even when we didn't protect you. I reached over and squeezed his hand. That's what family does, Robert. Even when it's hard. Later that evening, Charles found me in our cabin, staring out at the moonlight dancing on the water. I owe you an apology," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have stood up to Aaliyah years ago. I should have protected you from her behavior instead of making excuses for it. I failed you as a husband." The pain in his voice broke my heart. I turned to face him and saw tears streaming down his cheeks, tears I'd never seen in our 6 years together. "I was so afraid of losing my family that I almost lost you instead," he continued. "And you, God, Sage, you saved us all. You saved our tradition, our dignity, and somehow, you still found a way to love us through it." I pulled him into my arms, feeling his shoulders shake as he finally let himself feel the weight of what had almost been lost. "Sometimes family needs to learn boundaries," I told him softly, "and sometimes the people who love us need to enforce them. But Charles, you never lost me. You couldn't if you tried." The real breakthrough came on day 4. I was sitting alone on the deck, reading, when Aaliyah approached me. She looked smaller somehow, younger, like the scared little girl she must have been before the trust fund and entitlement built walls around her heart. "I was jealous," she said quietly, not looking at me. "My whole life, Charles protected me. He was my big brother, my safe place. When you came along, I thought he wouldn't need to take care of me anymore." My heart ached for her. "Oh, Aaliyah, love doesn't work that way. Charles having a wife doesn't mean he stops being your brother." She finally looked at me, tears flowing freely. "I've been horrible to you. For 3 years, I've been horrible, and you still saved our family. Why?" I set down my book and really looked at her, not as the woman who had tormented me, but as my husband's little sister who was scared and hurting. "Because that's what love does," I said simply. "It protects what matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." By the end of the week, something beautiful had happened. I found myself at the yacht's helm one afternoon, actually steering the boat while the family watched from the deck below. But this time, they weren't just watching respectfully. They were watching with love. Robert was teaching his grandson to tie nautical knots, but he kept looking up at me with genuine pride. Patricia was reading peacefully in the sun, but she'd made a point that morning to tell me how grateful she was for my patience with their family. Charles was grilling fish we'd caught that morning, humming contentedly for the first time in months. And Aaliyah? She was sitting quietly, finally understanding that family isn't about who's been there the longest, or whose blood runs through your veins. It's about who shows up when things get hard, who protects what matters, and who loves you enough to save your traditions even when you don't deserve it. As I stood there, hands on the wheel of my yacht, feeling the ocean breeze and surrounded by the sound of genuine laughter from the deck below, I felt something I'd been searching for my entire adult life. I felt like I was home. I had never needed their acceptance, but somewhere along the way, in saving their respect, I had found something even more precious. I had found my family. The final night of the trip, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the main cabin with the yacht's ownership papers spread out on the table. My hands were shaking as I held them, thinking about my grandmother who had saved every penny for 60 years, about my parents who had taught me that family was worth fighting for, about the scared little girl I used to be who dreamed of belonging somewhere. These documents represented more than ownership. They represented power, security, proof that I was worthy. But as I looked at them, I realized I didn't need proof anymore. I picked up each page one by one and quietly tore them into pieces, tears falling onto the torn paper. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release. You see, this had always been meant to be a gift. The ownership reveal, the power play, the public lesson, that had all been Aaliyah's choice, not mine. She had forced my hand, but my heart had always been in the same place. When we returned to shore, I transferred the yacht back to the family trust, exactly as I had originally planned. But it had my name as main beneficiary, so no one could take it away from me and the family. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't what they want, it's what they need. And this family needed to learn that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. But more than that, they needed to learn that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, it multiplies. The woman they had tried to exclude from their family yacht trip had just given them back their family yacht. But more importantly, she had given them back their family. whole and healed and stronger than before. And that's how you turn exclusion into inclusion, humiliation into healing, and betrayal into the greatest gift of all, the gift of understanding what family really means. As I swept up the torn ownership papers, I whispered a thank you to my grandmother, whose fishing boat money had bought more than just a yacht. It had bought me a family. And to my parents, who had taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose love, even when love is hard. The marina that morning had witnessed a screaming match. But by the end of that trip, it had hosted something much more beautiful. The birth of a real family, messy and imperfect and absolutely worth fighting for. If this story of yacht drama, family healing, and ultimate forgiveness touched you, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more incredible true stories about the power of love and family.